Hello and welcome. I'm here with Chris Musson. My name's Conor Matchett. We're the Scottish Sun's political team, and we're here to chat the results of the shocking, astonishing Hamilton by-election, which obviously happened yesterday. Chris, big night in Scottish politics.
Yep.
Take us up to date for those who either are still waking up or still sleeping. What happened last night?
It was quite an amazing win for Labour last night against the bookies' odds in the Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse Holyrood by-election. So everybody had written them off.
Including you.
Including me. Well, I hadn't written them off until the very last minute. I'd be very careful to say this is a really close race to everyone. People were asking me in the office and I was saying, Labour could still do it, you know. And then it got to 10 p.m. and the polls closed and everybody's sitting around with nothing to do. And I decide to commit to X, Twitter, my prediction that the SNP are going to narrowly win. There was absolutely no need for that, but they didn't narrowly win. Labour narrowly won ahead of the SNP, and then just behind them, Reform. It was an amazing turnaround given the bookies had Labour at 11 to 1 at the last minute to win, and the Nats like 1-6 on or something like that, and then Reform 6-1 second favourites, I think, at the last minute, and Labour basically turned it around and won this seat, which was won by the SNP in 2021. It's
an interesting one, isn't it? 'Cause, I mean, Anna Sarwar today has come out and blasted the political commentariat of which we form a part. He's blasted the likes of the bookies. He's slammed, this narrative that came from
fake news.
John Swinney about it being like a two-horse race between the SNP and Reform. I think certainly, I was taken away by the idea that SNP would win comfortably. That I still, a bit like you, was looking at it and going, there's still probably a three-way fight possibly. But Davy Russell, candidate for Scottish Labour, now an MSP, wasn't hugely impressive. Scottish Labour had a difficult campaign, at least appearances had so. So this is a massive boost, isn't it, for Anna Sarwar?
Yeah, well, I mean, you say Davy Russell wasn't particularly impressive. He wasn't particularly impressive to kind of us folk in the media because he didn't really do many interviews and stuff. But Labour seems to have concentrated on the bread and butter, on the ground campaign. In fact, here in the room with us, you can't see him, but behind the cameras is our video guru, Gary, who lives in Hamilton. And Gary, I won't tell you which way he voted, but Gary says that basically all he saw were Labour activists on the ground in Hamilton. And, it's just one guy, and he could be making it up, but, it's perhaps a bit telling that, everybody else was focused on the stagecraft and John Swinney's set pieces and Nigel Farage coming up, but Labour did the hard graft around the doors, and that appears to have paid off.
Well, this is the thing. The Labour source, I was out in Hamilton this morning seeing Anna Sarwar celebrate alongside all of his MSPs and MPs the great victory. And one senior Scottish Labour source said to me, we were told 4 weeks out from this election we've got 8,500 promised voters. And it was all about getting them out. And I think you've got the numbers in front of you. How many turned out?
They got 8,559 votes, Scottish Labour, then 7,957 for the SNP, 7,088 for Reform. Now, that Reform result is incredible because they got 58 votes at the 2021 election for the same seat, and they have gone up to 7,088 with 26.1% of the vote share, which I know this is a by-election and people say, these percentages can be exaggerated, but, Reform are polling max about 20% in the national polls. So to get 26% is an incredible result for them. And, on a different day with a win behind them and maybe with some different campaigning, I mean, they're very close to winning, which is it's horrifying for these major parties. And if you look at the Conservatives, I mean, they got 6% of the vote and 1,600 votes. I mean, this is absolutely devastating for them because now Reform are saying we are the third party. The Holyrood election next year is a three-horse race, and Russell Finley's Scottish Conservatives are just kind of nowhere.
Absolutely. I bumped into Ross Lambie as well, the Reform UK candidate this morning, and Thomas Kerr, the councillor in Glasgow, who's been the media face of Reform for a long time since he defected. And they are over the moon with that result last night. I mean, there's a lot of talk about them possibly finishing second, I think in a different a different day, a different Labour Party, they absolutely would have done. Different SNP, they absolutely potentially could have done. This is a significant breakthrough for reform, isn't it? I mean, it's the sort of stuff that Nigel Farage, the political people in Holyrood broadly thought Nigel Farage could never make a breakthrough in Scottish politics. There it is.
Well, he's here now, isn't he? Yeah. And we were going to talk about John Swinney, weren't we?
We were. So, where does this leave John Swinney? I mean, he's been... He used this, didn't he, as a bit of a test run, I think, for the Holyrood election next year. Like, can we get people turn out, vote for us by using the bogeyman as self-styled bogeyman of Nigel Farage?
Yeah.
But he's ended up, losing, and now has some old foes coming for him.
Well, it's incredible how badly they did, given how much they threw at this, the SNP, and their tactics, which were to say, falsely, it is a two-horse race between the SNP and Reform. I say falsely, I'm not saying that he lied, because obviously he's been out today, Swinney, and said, no, I was correct when I said that. Like, how he works it out, who knows? And he's basically saying, yes, it was his impression that it was a two-horse race. Well, okay, John, whatever. I think a lot of people in the Nats knew that this was a three-horse race all along, and they tried to bounce voters, Labour, SNP voters, into backing the SNP to keep out Reform. But that's not the case. It's blown up in his face quite badly, because it makes him look quite slippery, I think, this. He's basically told the whole country that it's a two-horse race.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. And he either knew that or he should have known that.
I'd certainly suggest that the SNP data, and by-elections are won and lost on the data that the parties have, but it suggests that if you're giving John Swinney the benefit of the doubt, the SNP data is nonsensical.
Yeah, I know. I mean, it's a total mess, and they've got some serious rethinking to do. I mean, Alex Neil's already been out today, hasn't he? The old SNP veteran, rebel. He was never going to say anything nice, to be honest, was he? But he has basically said that Swinney should go, and in the coming days, there's going to be more discontent, I think. How the SNP respond to this now, I'm not sure, but I'm not sure that doubling down on this tactic of just using the Reform bogeyman is going to work. They're going to have to regroup and work out what the heck to do.
Absolutely. Let's shift this on to looking ahead. This is, we all talked about it, this being big bellwether seat in terms of the Holyrood election next May. This is a big momentum boost for Labour. If we look more broadly, where does this leave the kind of, let's talk about the main four parties. To me, big boost to Labour suggests that they've got the opportunity to win quite a few seats in the Central Belt. SNP on the back foot, going to need to do something big to get into Holyrood next year. Reform could win 20 seats on a performance like that, and the Tories are nowhere. Yeah,
I mean, everybody's talking about momentum and how this might give Labour the momentum. It certainly gives them a boost, and it will make the Scottish public think that this narrative about Labour slumping, which has been showing in the polls, is not necessarily going to be played out at the election, and might make people think, well, if it's a choice between Labour and the SNP, say, for first and second, they might stick within the confines of those two horses rather than look to Reform. This result, though, doesn't actually, if played out at a national level, the seat projections, because everything is so uncertain given the Holyrood vote system, it doesn't actually mean that Labour will romp home in a Holyrood election. In fact, some of the projections that we're seeing based on this result today means that the SNP would get about 50 seats, even if they got less of a vote share than Labour. Reform would perhaps even get more seats than Labour because of the way they would just be picking up regional seats. So Labour are far from home and dry next year. They've got a lot of work to do, but they are far from dead, which is what some people were.
I mean, on your little piece of paper there of the you can see actually that despite Labour winning, they're 2 percentage points down on their 2021 result, which was historically one of their worst in history of devolution. It's worth mentioning Hamilton, Larkhall and Stonehouse, one of Labour's strongest places in the entire country. They fought the Rutherglen by-election next door 2 years ago. They won this seat last year comfortably. this is Labour absolute kind of like central. If they're not winning a seat here, they would be in deep trouble come 2026.
Yeah.
But similarly, the SNP, it was their seat, and they've plummeted by 17%.
Yeah, down by 17 percentage points. But into this mix, it's obviously a different landscape to 2021 because you've got reform coming in. But yeah, the SNP are really struggling on 29% of the vote. It's hard to see how they can go much lower than that. So I've said this repeatedly, given the SNP core support, I think it's hard to see how they can go much lower than that. But what Labour have got to do now, they've got to eke that up. They've got to persuade people who've gone to reform to come back to them now.
Yeah.
I mean, the volatility is incredible, all this happening over the last year. People going to Labour and then going to reform. So you've had Tory to Labour to reform voters, for example. You've had SNP to Labour to reform voters. It's all over the place. Voters are all over the place, and these shifting sands, these moving parts. There's a lot to come over the next year, which is going to be incredibly interesting in the run up to the Holyrood election. Absolutely, and the best place for you to keep up to date with all of that is right with us at the Scottish Sun. So make sure both to visit us online and also sign up to our weekly newsletter, This Week in Scottish Politics, and come back over the weekend because there'll be more to come from Hamilton. Thank you very much, Chris. Thank you very much for watching at home.